Alright, hello and welcome to the Mega Man Ultimate Battle Network Tournament Bracket B. I am your host of the T-Chop of the T-Chop team, and I have with me Soul!
Hey, how you guys doing? What's up?
So we're going to be going through Bracket B today. I have Bracket A up here. Element Man just absolutely pulling it from behind, even though he started the second bracket. The Aqua Ball pulling the Bug Sword from Iris, and then getting the Bubble Man chip. Just absolutely secured some of the tools. They will be going towards that final bracket with the Z Saver of all things. But as we head into Bracket B, I would like to cover again the rules for encounters in this tournament. There are navies, final bosses, and viruses. When an entity defeats another, they gain the respective chip, so to speak, and adds it to their own chip library with no limits. So you can have more than 1 giga, more than 5 megas, no limits. Viruses will always lose to navies minus the final bosses of the respective video games. Navies who have the capacity to do more with their defeated opponent may do so once the battle is over. So bases get programmed, for example, will be usable on his defeated opponents. All battles in this tournament are solely discussion. If you came because you heard machinations are back, they are not. They're still gone. We highly recommend the viewers of this tournament come to their own decisions and comment your own winners down in the comments below. For each battle, we will randomly roll a field, which the navies will conduct battle. The capacities of the navies will reference the video games and the manga in some instances. It should be noted that navies like Base and Mega will not possess all of their capabilities, because that would be sort of crazy, but they will possess some of them to the best of their ability.
Yeah, I think that's definitely fair because there's no way Mega Man or Base loses with what they have in the manga, especially. Oh, jeez.
They are still pretty crazy because they will have all of their best abilities from each game. So that means that Base will be coming in with the Gospel. He will be coming in with the Base plus the Earthbreaker that can actually create perma-holes, as we
Yeah.
saw in Battle Network 3.
Earthbreaker's like one of the best abilities, dude. Oh, and then the Dark Sword that he gets in 4 and 5? Yes, please.
Absolutely. The regenerating Dark Aura will also be crazy because unless the Navi has an extremely high power level, they will not be able to break that unless they have a wind attribute.
Oh, dang, you gave him Dark Aura, not Life Aura? I did. Oh, jeez, that's rough.
Remember that it's
That's rough.
for the first match we have Judgman versus the Green UFO. The Green UFO is actually a virus from Battle Network 2, I believe, and the
Yep.
capture chip guarantees battle chip drops.
Whoa, so that's actually a really iconic drop there for him too. Like, imagine any other virus he goes up against, he's definitely gonna be guaranteed that chip in his folder. Like, so if I remember correctly, there's no like busting level that we're assuming here, right?
Yes, we are assuming they always gain the chip that is verified, so Judgman will take that catcher. The difference with the catcher in this tournament is that it will upgrade the chips. So V3 chips will actually become V4 chips.
Ooh. So this is kind of reminiscent to me from Boundary 4, how you can fight a virus as the level 3, but there was the level 3 EX version, which where they were like all black usually. Is this kind of like that?
Yes, Omega viruses are a thing in this. Not all of them are them, but we see in the previous tournament that, or not the previous tournament, the previous bracket, that we had the Mako EXs, for example, which was the fifth version of the sheep virus in BN4, as well as the Zybon EX from 5.
All right, then let's go with our first round. So, Judgment versus UFO, right?
Yes, unfortunately, because it is Navi versus Virus, and the UFO actually does not have any attacks, Judgment will just be picking that up and going on to the next round.
Yeah, I don't see Judgment ever losing that fight. That's no contest. Next.
Unfortunately, Navis will always defeat viruses, so there's no controversy like, oh, Matar beat base.
The only the only Navi I see losing to viruses like legit
Hmm.
are not even normal Navis, like because normal Navis were used by like the net police basically. But those Navis you see in Pound 3 that look like average to everyday people, those are the Navis that
Hmm.
would lose to the
I think
virus,
these
right?
were
Like
also called normal navies.
I think they are, but I don't know the proper definition.
Right. Alright, so the next matchup, we actually have an interesting one. We have the Satellite Viruses for Battle Network 3 versus the Mamogras.
Well, virus versus virus. How interesting. Okay, so Mamogra is really interesting because it hides under the ground, right?
Yes, we will
And
try to sneak up on the satellite virus, but if it does so, it risks the chance of coming into contact and being deleted.
okay, remind us, what is the Satella virus?
The Satella virus is a satellite type virus that will usually appear at the back of the stage. It is an electric type, and it will constantly orb up and down. If people are familiar with the Bubble Star chip from BN6, its movement pattern is similar like that, and it will damage you usually via contact.
So Mamogra, I feel like has an edge here because when they go through the whole stage, they appear back in the same spot, which is the perfect opportunity for Mamogra to just pop out and just whap with his little self. So I don't know. I feel like it's interesting. I think the Mamogra has the edge here.
The Momogra has the edge here, but it also has to do with the Momogra will always try to hit behind the opponent. But this also means this is where the satellite is going. So the question is, will the Momogra or the satellite do more damage? Because if the Momogra can't delete the satellite virus, then they are probably going to be deleted since Momogra don't have a high HP base.
Hmm, that's interesting. I think they don't have high HP. Yeah, Satella would definitely win at the end.
In the end, because the Satella does constantly undulate up and down, the Momogra just isn't faster than the Satella virus. They also get pretty crazy later in the series when they get various versions like the EX. The Momogra is very similar speed, but we will be moving on to the next one. Speaking of Bubble Star, Clockman.
Okay, so Clockman is extremely strong, but who's he fighting against?
He is fighting the Bubble Star virus, the
Oh yeah,
Starfish
no,
3.
that's an amazing pickup actually for Clockman because he could get some sick confirms off of a Bubble Star battle chip, and then whoa, wait, is his next opponent gonna be Satella too?
That's
Those
right.
are really that's really good chips to
He's
pack up. Like that's
going to
combo.
be packing these chips. The negative side to this is that there are more Navi matchups in this tournament, so he will actually have less Navi chips in his utility kit. The Starfish actually helps him immensely, though, because Clockman's mechanics work as time goes on. So by stalling with a Bubble Star, he can actually set up for not only Aqua damage or the Satella, but he can also stall so that all of his mechanics can activate because he has a universal attack that goes on if the match lasts long enough.
Nice, nice.
So he will be going to the next match, and he will be taking that chip with him. And next one, we have another interesting attorney. We don't have normal Navis, I believe, but we do have the Heal Navi.
Ooh.
So the Heal Navi is a very interesting type because they will always take a Crack Bomb with them, which does a plus-sized bomb attack. They can summon viruses like the Matar or the Fanfare. They can use a Wide Sword or a Fighter Sword, and they can generally brute force things. They also can carry recover 300s with them, which is very
Sure.
useful. But the Holy Panel that the Brushman 3 drops, the Brushman 3 actually doesn't attack people, very similar to the UFO catcher, but they will instead put holy panels on the virus side and put down poison panels on your side of the arena.
Yeah, okay. So the poison side, like, how do you? It's an ignorant thing to do. You make holy panels for yourself, and then you give your opponent an ice panel or a poison panel. Those viruses are so annoying to fight. They're the worst. The actual worst.
Like most BN3 viruses, it's typically more of a support navi. Like the Dominards, they will typically hide behind them and typically make it more difficult for them to fight. But the heal navi, being a navi still, will take that holy panel and be fighting Shadow Man of all people. Shadow Man is going to be an interesting fight, and we will see what happens to them later. And next up, we have Boomer versus Searchman. So, what do you think about that? Because Searchman already has a lot of area utility. So, what will you think he'll be able to do with the Boomer?
So locking down your opponent into the back row, or even just pressuring them enough to get the two center panels that they have, is enough to confirm booners. Yeah, Searchman can easily do that and pressure his opponent. So the fact that Boomer's getting in this arsenal and that it doesn't flinch, so you can kind of like chain combo that into a charge shot,
Hmm.
it's kind of good. That's kind of good.
Searchman is able to not only zone with his grenades, but he can also fire come down and probably confirm his satellite attack, which also cracks panels and destroys them, I believe. If
And
he
if you
lands
get
them.
like a center panel destroyed, yeah, that's a tough spot to be in because now this Boomer can line up.
We got another virus matchup. It's not going to matter, unfortunately, because the Trumpy Omega doesn't actually attack anything. And this is the annoying spider virus from BN4.
Oh no. Okay, hold
Would
on.
you like to give everyone a lesson on what the Iraqi EX does?
So what Iraqi EX does? It's really simple. It follows you around on your board. So like, let's say you have your 3x3 grid on your side, the red side, of course. The Iraqi virus will appear on your side and start following you wherever you go, right? Eventually, if enough time passes, it'll start setting webs as a trap. And when you walk into those, it does damage. So it's basically doing collision damage with its own body, or it's trying to damage you and zone you out with the webs. Here's the problem. If
If the
if you
virus
fight that
can't fight
virus,
back.
that literally can't do anything. Like, yeah, like, okay, which trumpet is he fighting against? Fanfare?
He is running against the Trumpy Omega, so that will be the Discord. But the way the Trumpy Omega works is it can drop any of them. So typically we would roll for what chip they get, but considering we know he's going to get Searchman, there's very little since they only pick up the one chip that represents the opponent. They do not pick up their entire chip library.
Okay, good, because if Searchman got access to Timpani and Arachne, oh, that would be a massacre. Oh my goodness, that's so bad.
Would you like to talk about the chip White Web 3, though, before we go on there? Because that is a good utility chip going into the future.
So YWeb 3 likes to set up an entire row with webs, right? On your opponent's side only. And if you like touch the web, you take damage, obviously. But there's interesting setups in Battlefield 4 where you can do something like a fan and blow your opponent through their row to take damage from each web because they don't cause flashing. Actually, I think that's one of the very few wood chips in the Battlefield 4 library that doesn't cause flashing.
Does
It's
the
weird.
Boomer not also cause no flinching? In fact, I think most wood chips in BN4 actually don't cause flashing.
In BX4, okay, every chip in that game pretty much causes flashing.
Hmm,
Um, the only time wood chips stop being mandatory flashing is in Battlefield 6.
interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that is important to note because Searchman did pick up the Boomer 3, which is the latest and strongest version, so that will actually be non-flinching.
Yeah. Well, if you take that logic of Battlefield 6, then yeah, they'll all be non-flashing.
Hmm.
Flinching's a little bit different than flashing because flinching is when your head reels back after getting hit with a really powerful attack. Flashing is when you get hit and you have that little bit intangible state.
Right.
And wood chips in Boundary 4 and 5 would cause that intangible state, as opposed to just flinching your opponent,
Correct.
which is why they were less useful here.
Next up is one of the ones and one of the reasons why I mentioned this to you earlier, Soul. It's Ride Man from Phantom of the Network
Ooh,
versus
I like
Rush. So
no.
this is a very popular chip from Battle Network 1 PvP, and anyone who knows why can probably imagine, since pop-up is a very special chip. The way pop-up works is it makes you invisible the longest period out of all of the invis chips. The problem with that is it also makes you invincible.
Yep.
So Riotman will be taking that, and before we go too far into it, I will explain some of Riotman's attacks for those who aren't for those who are interested. Riotman is a very interesting Navi because he has 3 attacks. He has a linear shot with a revolver, a long chain, and he can also toss hay bales. So there's not going to be a lot of Navis in this bracket that actually toss objects. So that's actually very interesting because he's going against Cutman, one of the only other object handling Navis in this bracket. So we'll be able to see how that goes in a little bit.
All right, cool. Let's go on next.
Nightman versus the Goofball.
Remind me,
Defense.
which one's the goofball? Which one's the goofball?
The Goofball is, if you remember Hospital Comp from Battle Network 3, it is the virus that teleports around with a mask on it, and they will stop in the front column, and they'll push the mask forward to leave themselves vulnerable, and it will poison the area. The chip functions the exact same. You would hold the A button, and it would poison the opponent's area for 2 columns while you are holding it out. So that is actually an amazing defense chip because the mask actually does protect you from hits. Typically,
Wow, doing some damage. Nice.
typically how you would get around this is you would use throwable projectiles or you would use a fire sword. Column attacks will also go through, but on top of Nightman, who already has so many defensive options, like the Stone Skin or otherwise, it is definitely a very, very good match. Considering they will have to deal with that Stone Skin, which reduces all damage to basically 1 or none if they have no breaking chips in their library.
Well, that's actually a really strong strategy for Nightman too, because now he's actually getting some serious DPS while not moving. It's kind of ridiculous, actually.
Keep in mind, we are using the strongest version of Nightman. In 5, Nightman would actually move and he would only crack some panels, but in BN2, he would actually crack the entire opponent's area and then break them whenever he moved.
Well, yeah, that is a really good version of Nightman.
Oh no! Oh no! I messed up. Oh no!
Wait, what happened?
Oh no! I mixed the viruses again! Ah!
No!
Alright, so this is the Sparknoid. This is the actual Satellite 3 that we are familiar with that functions around like a satellite. That means this virus up here is actually the literal satellite, which summons a satellite in Battle Network 1. I should have known.
Oh, the machine gun. Yes. I kind of thought that's what that was, but I gave you the benefit of the doubt here, because I kind of forgot the differences between the two.
Which would you think would win in that case? The satellite doesn't move, so the Momogar would basically get a free hit on it, no?
Yeah, it would probably be the Momoga's Rendon.
Alright, so that's a quick fix. There we go. Sorry, Satella. But that's actually huge because it's Groundman. So Groundman is actually has breaking element as a natural part of his utility kit. And the satellite is not only a very fast projectile, but it does electric damage. It can also orbit objects if it strikes it, or break them.
I'm not sure. Yeah, this is a really bad matchup for Nightman, but well, I guess we'll get to that later.
Indeed, it's going to be very interesting considering they both have super armor. So next up, we have another virus matchup. It's the Puffy 3, which is the Aqua Needle virus, and the Hardhead, which is the Cannonball. Uh, this is pretty simple because the Puffy will constantly barrage the spot that the enemy is standing on with the Aqua Needles, and the Hardhead doesn't move, so as soon as it becomes... actually, what do you think? Do you think the Puffy would be able to do enough damage during those small...
Here's the problem. The okay, so neither of them move, but the Hardhead is invincible until it opens its mouth, right?
But the
Now, when it
Hardhead...
does open its mouth, it auto aims its cannonball at the nearest enemy. So it will auto aim at the Puffy. Now, here's the thing. It depends on who has more HP here. Because if the Puffy gets hit 3 times, it starts spewing out those needles way faster at an alarming rate. Right?
Hmm.
But the cannonball's not it's not opening its mouth as often. It's only sporadically or after a certain amount of time that it opens its mouth to spit out that cannonball, and it does a lot of damage when it does hit. So who's the tankier one here is the question.
I believe it would go to the Hardhead because not only is the Hardhead tankier in general, but also the Hardhead will actually be the only one to really capitalize on those damage windows, even if they got the 3 needles out during the lack of invulnerability period. The Hardhead is always hitting for maximum damage every single time.
That's actually a really good point. It'd be too invariable for the Puffy there because yeah, it shoots out 3 needles, but there's no guarantee that all 3 will hit. It will probably sometimes be only one, depending on the timing of the aura head.
Hmm. The Puffy does
So,
also randomly shoot defensively against its opponent. It doesn't try to time its shots at all.
right. Yeah, definitely hard head win there.
And the time hath come, finally. Thunderman versus Roll. I talked a little bit about this with Soul beforehand, but both of these navis have a large range of mechanics. Thunderman actually has 3 clouds that go down each row and constantly shoot orbs at opponents in those rows. If they come into contact too long, they will actually shock in a certain symbol, while Thunderman can also even stop and shock down on different areas that the opponent is in, while basically keeping a maximum distance.
Meanwhile, Roll has some interesting features as well. When she is shot at, she can actually teleport out of that roll or that you're in with her, and kind of just roll out of the way into another section, completely avoiding damage. It's like a teleport of sorts. And plus, she also has the nifty ability to summon viruses to the field to battle for her. So it's like, it's very interesting. And she's probably the fastest Navi bar Quickman. I think the only Navi faster than her in this entire game is Quickman. She's insanely fast.
It's absolutely true, and we can't forget that they're using the strongest forms of their abilities. She will have the roll flash, which heals her, and she will also be using Battleship Challenges Heal, which if anyone played, basically Roll would always finish her attacks off with healing herself, which is actually huge in terms when she will have to stretch out a match or need to extend for time.
But there's also the ability that Thunderman has where he launches out a Thunderball that does paralysis, and when you are paralyzed, he can shoot down the row with a Thunderbolt beam.
It's true. But we can't forget one of Roll's strongest abilities, the Roll Arrow. The longer this tournament goes on, if Roll proceeds through this bracket, Roll will only get stronger because she can destroy opponents' chips, entire hands with the Roll Arrow. It is absolutely insane what an ability this is, and it is a very quick attack, so if the opponent does not block it with some kind of chip or with some kind of ability, then there is no way for them to really deal with it.
The Roll Arrow battle chip was one of the best battle chips to use in Boundary 4 PvP because of its ability to destroy chips. It's just a filthy chip. People talk about jealousy, people talk about Searchman, but they don't ever talk about Roll Arrow and how disgusting that chip was, especially if you have it in code. Like, but that's her charge shot. So it's you're just sitting here like, yo, wait a minute. She does that battle chip just by holding the B button. There's not a lot that can beat that. It's really strong.
That is true, and both of these navies both float. We do have to keep in mind that Roll does have burst barrier because in 4.5 she ran first barrier of all things. So she just randomly will have the first barrier to block any sort of attack here, and sort of stall for a little bit, even though she's already healing. So let's.
Yeah, and that would also like buy her the time to just go ahead and destroy your chips too, because she's gonna eat the first one for free regardless.
Of course. So let's spin the wheel and try to determine where these two will fight, since both don't really necessarily are impacted as much by the areas. We're probably not going to see that much of a change, but let's see if we can find anything.
Oh, I hope it's the bogged field.
Ah, no.
Oh, ocean.
Oh no! This is
actually really bad for
terrible!
Roll. This is really bad for Roll. Okay,
Would you
not
like.
necessarily, right? So the way Roll moves, here's what ocean panels do. Ocean panels actually slow movement when you're moving up and down between rolls, right? Roll's speed is so fast that it will probably be reduced to a normal speed while she's in the ocean. But she also teleports between panels. She doesn't just randomly move either, right? She teleports between panels, which is kind of lagless in a way, right?
You have to remember, Sol, that she does have the air and the float shoes, so she's not going to be inhibited by these sand panels or the sea panels. She will just be gliding above these. The real danger comes with the fact that these sea panels actually cause an increase in electrical damage from Thunderman.
That is true, and they do last for a very long time. I think it's like 600 frames until they disappear, which is like maybe 4 or 5 turns in slow gauge, but in a normal gauge, it's probably like 8 turns of just ocean panels existing. Yeah, that's tough.
So the question was before, and it still is, does Roll just outlast Thunderman? Because she does have the ability to teleport into her opponent's area and damage the Thunderman. Thunderman has no options for close-up combat, and furthermore, Roll can actually make the enemy flinch while she's hitting them.
Yes, and while she's in his face doing damage, she's actually just not taking any damage from the thunderclouds either, or even any paralysis even, because she's not in her own zones at that moment because she's done rushed up. Yeah, that's tough. But the double damage, any stray hits on Roll will do twice the amount of damage. I don't know. That's a tough call.
The thing that really decides this, I believe, is Roll's healing. So all of these attacks, even if Roll gets nicked by a stray Thunderbolt that aims at the spot she teleports back to, Roll does heal up most of the damage, even if she is a moderately, at least a little tanky bit of a Navi. She's not a very bulky Navi, but she still has a decent HP pool. She will actually, I think, outlast Thunderman here. Even with the C panels, I think there's just no tools to really keep up with that sort of speed in Thunderman's kit or block some of this damage.
At the end of the day, bet on the guy with the healing factor. And that's Roll.
Yes, I can't wait to see the Uvu edit of Roll with Wolverine claws. And that is important to mention that Roll will be picking up a Thunder Chip, which can hit 3 columns away. So navies who prioritize on staying farther away will still get hit by that. So this is another interesting same versus same matchup. Shade Man versus Quick Man. Most people will remember Shade Man as the vampire Navi from Battle Network 4, from Battle Network 5. He has amazing dark capabilities while not only being a Dark Lloyd, he can stun opponents with his Sonic Pulse. He can attack people. He can bite them and drain their HP. He also can split into bats to completely mitigate damage, just absolutely nullifying it.
Jeez, yeah. Quickman also has this little ability here where he just kind of blocks using his quick boomerang as a shield or a quick shield. It can block a lot of Shade Man's like setups, especially since they're kind of slow in comparison to what Quickman can do.
That's right, Quickman will always take the opportunity to block any attack. That's right, even breaking chips won't make it through his boomerangs, and they will actually just be blocked before Quickman moves around. It is interesting because Shademan doesn't have a lot of utility that will actually make it hit him while he's moving, except for the Sonic Pulse, which hits in a cone of sorts. There's
There
also
is also, yeah, I think we're about to say the exact same thing, but go ahead.
he also sends the bats. The
Bats.
bats.
Yes. Bats.
uh, he can send bats or bat viruses at his opponent to try to intercept them. So I think this is really going to impair them because Quickman doesn't really have a lot of ways. He can't actually hit through the bat defense where Shademan splits into 4 bats upon being hit because the quick boomerang doesn't stop after being hit by the opponent. They will actually go straight through it.
Well, here's the thing about that too. When you hit Shade Man, he turns into 4 bats. One of those bats are supposed to be his actual hitboxes where he can take damage, but the other bats are just decoys essentially, and poof when they're touched. So you have to guess correctly. Usually, one is highlighted, but in the sake of actual battle, I feel like they wouldn't be so obvious to an opponent, right?
Hmm.
But you have to guess which one of these bats is the real Shade Man to deal damage to him in the first place. So that's an amazing defense to have built into your kit, which is kind of hard to deal with, regardless of how fast you are.
Hmm. Both of these Navis have impeccable defensive options as well. Shademan is able to completely nullify blows by splitting the bats, and Quickman can block basically any attack. They both also fly, so they will actually not deal with most of the hazardous effects that would usually be capturing them in these fields.
I think Quickman has the float shoes ability, but I do not think that he has the air shoes ability.
Really? So if we do get perma holes, then that will actually make it very difficult for Quickman to move, or impossible, which means the Shademan will actually just secure the match, since Quickman doesn't really have anywhere to go to avoid any of his attacks.
Let's see what happens. Oh, this is gonna be close.
There are matches specifically designed for and against Dark Lords, so as long as we don't hit either of those... And the Bog Swamp! So let me just refer to my... Alright, so this is interesting. So the Bog Swamp will not only have swamp panels, but they will also have sea panels.
Ooh.
This is basically a flooded swamp area, and this is basically very interesting. It doesn't have an influence on this match, but I'm glad it came up. Because now this means nothing is going to hinder Shademan from attacking Quickman. So at this point, do we really think that Quickman is able to block enough attacks and exchange enough damage?
There's also the factor that the Sonic Wave has an AoE effect. He can block the initial hit, but the hitbox of the Sonic Wave lingers. So there is a chance that he can just move too quickly into that spot and get hit anyway, which you've seen a lot of AI do back in the day. Like, the AI is not that smart, you know?
Quickman's movement is sporadic, and even though Quickman does use a slash attack when he's low on HP, that does not necessarily mean it's going to hit Shademan. I think Shademan is going to do what he said he was going to do in BN4. I think he's going to continue in the bracket. What do you think, Sol?
Definitely a win here for Shade Man.
Alright, and would you like to tell everyone about the Quickman chip in general?
Well, the quick man chip is really unique. It kind of sends out a boomerang at your opponent, and it hits twice. One going forward, one coming back.
So that'll be a very good way of just confirming damage on low health opponents, because these chips attacks are actually very strong in general.
And putting your opponent into a stun lock situation will allow for certain follow-ups, like a sonic wave, which could put the opponent into a paralysis state. So not only are you flinching in place, now you're in a paralysis state. And now we're getting chain combos that I probably have no business getting in the first place.
This can also be followed up by the bite attack, where Shaman drains their HP.
Ah, true. And we didn't even talk about that. Regaining HP. Always bet on the person with the healing factor.
He is a vampire after all, but we're coming back around, and we have Gateman versus Judgeman. It's sort of funny because both of these Navis are basically brothers from different mothers. Both of these Navis utilize long-ranged attacks and summon objects to guard each other from each other's attacks. Would you like to discuss some of Gateman's kit, Soul?
I unfortunately do not think Gateman wins this matchup. Oh, here's the thing. Gateman would usually summon little soldiers to run across the field to do damage. But there's two problems with that. The first pawn and the second pawn. And then we have the horse. I don't know if anyone's ever fought Kingman ever in their life, but in Battle Network 3, that is one of the hardest bosses to play against with a limited move pool or chip pool. Now, in this tournament, not only do players have a limited chip pool, but they barely have ways to like really pressure objects. And this man starts with them for free, and they deal damage.
Oh, this is Gateman.
Yeah, I'm talking about Kingman.
Well,
No,
Kingman will definitely be dangerous when we get to him.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. Oof. I jumped the gun. But still, like,
I agree. Kingman is a very powerful alternative because he always has such dominance of the field state. He will constantly change objects in and out depending on area control and what the opponent's strategy is.
Okay, this is Gateman. Oh, I'm so dumb. Yeah, okay. Yeah, Gateman versus Judgeman. This is interesting. Gateman does have summons, which can block books, and books don't come out very often, right? But Judgment does have the stun whip, which is pretty interesting, and Gateman does stop moving to summon those little soldiers that come out of his chest there. So that's a perfect opportunity for a Judge Whip to come out, do some paralysis, and get some some paralysis chains going.
It is true that Judgment does have the paralysis on his whip, and that Gateman does stop moving to not only fire the laser from his chest, but also to release the soldiers. It is, keep in mind, that Judgeman's defensive book actually doesn't have that high of an HP base, so Gateman's laser will actually be able to deal with it, and still hit Judgeman, of all things, if they're in the same column. Moreover, Gateman's gate actually can't really be destroyed unless I'm remembering wrong, so it will always constantly block attacks from that end. Even though Judgment's whip will pierce, at this point it's really a question of if Judgeman can overcome Gateman's bulky HP base to really just finish up the match.
Yeah, I gotta say Gateman kind of takes this one. There is the opportunity for Judgment to get stun locks and chain combos in, but that laser is really powerful, and Judgment's gonna want to line up to attack him in that vulnerable moment. But Judgment lacking super armor is just gonna get caught up by that beam and not be able to do too much damage at all.
The other thing we have to consider is that the gate will always match the book that Judgment summons, so that means the Bubble Star, the Golem hit, and the Fireburner are all going to be blocked by the gate.
That's
Furthermore,
true.
the gate can attack on its own. It does have a hand that reaches out and grabs you. Well, it doesn't grab you, but it
Ooh.
like claws you. Like that is.
Actually, you know what? Yeah, I can see where Judgment might actually get dubbed here because of that book alone.
Hmm.
What do you think?
I think we should look at the location. Who knows? We might be surprised. Might be get another ocean. And it's the power plant. The power
Well, what's the
plant.
power plant?
All right, the power plant is pretty simple, I believe, if I recall correctly. Yep, it is just metal panels. So that means if the Navis had any capacity to try to destroy the panels, they would be unable to. Unfortunately, we're not dealing with any of the. Oh wait, that is true. The book on Judgment's side actually does release a fire burner, but that means it can't destroy the panels now.
That means the limited movement on Gateman's side isn't even a factor to consider. But that there is the fact that Gateman's movement is predictable and within itself because of the pause to open up the gates on his chest.
Hmm. Even
So
if
it's basically like, in theory, that means he's being locked down in movement anyway, right?
that is true, but this we have to keep in mind that the Gateman gate will intercept the books and the big book that he's Judgment summons, which will actually make it very easy for him to dodge, get his own attacks in during that time. And if Judgment chooses to try to take care of these minions that he summons, he can get hit by the laser. So it's just a matter of initiative in that case. Does Judgment go for the whip and risk getting hit by the claw attack by the gate, which acts independently of Gateman? Or does he go to try to destroy the soldiers and then he gets hit by the claw attack anyways?
Uh, yeah, this is tough. This is
Unfortunately,
actually a tough match.
Unfortunately, the UFO actually doesn't do anything, so it won't actually add any help to the match for Judgment as well. It won't give any pressure, so it will actually be difficult. I believe
Winner Gateman?
I believe it would go to Gateman because Gateman has
Yep.
more opportunities for damage. He does have the counter with the gate in case Judgment even stuns him in the first place, and he also has the laser for not only destroying the book that he summons, but also for just damaging Judgment a significant amount.
Winner Gateman, excuse me.
All right,
That was a difficult match to get through. Yikes.
then that's a lot of the fun, and Gateway will move forward with the Judgment chip of all things. He is -1 chip because he did not fall into the beginning of this bracket, but the Judgment chip is strong enough that we're not necessarily worried about that. But his later
Oh.
competitor has some very strong tools in his kit. He will be picking up this Momogra chip, which is absolutely insane considering Clockman's entire strategy is stalling out to 12. As soon as 12 actions are taken, Clockman will hit the entire stage with an extremely powerful laser. And with the Mole 3 chip, he could just very well stall for that period of time.
Yeah, this is gonna be rough. Clockman with the Momogra chip here is a little powerful.
Would you
We'll
like
just have to see how that comes down to it.
Would you like to explain the Molt chip for anyone who hasn't played Battle Network 3 or 2 or 1?
So the mold chip makes you kind of go underneath ground for a set duration of time, depending on the level of the chip. And this chip being Mole 3, that means you can very well see this person camp underground for at least 2 turns if given the opportunity. Here's the thing though, if the person using the mole chip makes an attack, they pop out of the ground to, shoot their buster, which is the perfect opportunity to play Whack the Mole. Now that this mole has come out of its hole, this is my chance to do some damage. But you have to be fast, you have to be able to react to that. So it's not necessarily an easy thing to do.
That is true. We will have to see how Gateman deals with Clockman because Clockman isn't the smartest Navi. He's not going to stop attacking just because he has the defensive options. But we can save that for later because right now we have Shadow Man versus the Heal Navi.
Okay, this is definitely a quick match because
This is
the
a
heel
sweep.
navies work. Yeah, like they literally work for this guy. Like I don't become your lackey and then just beat you up. No, that doesn't make
Would
any
you like
sense.
to even touch into Shadow Man's huge kit, or would we like to keep this for later?
Uh, let's keep it pushing because this isn't even entertaining at this point. This is
Alright, so Shadow Man will defeat the Heal Navi. He just has two as utility. He has such a large kit. And the Heal Navi, he just has basic chips. He's like A folder. He's like new game Mega Man. He doesn't have anything.
no nothing.
All right, and he will actually pick up a bug bomb from the Heal Navi, so that'll be interesting to look at in the future.
That is interesting. Why the bug bomb?
The Heal Navi is very typically uh, associated with bugs or viruses, and they typically don't really make a strong picture for themselves. So they decided on the bug bomb as a sort of method of creating a unique image for the Heal Navi and giving defeating them really a purpose. Because the bug bomb can actually confuse navies, it can mess them up, it can give them HP bug, which can make long matches actually very difficult. Now, what Shadow Man can actually do with that is he can stall with his clones while the enemy's HP is ticking with that HP bug, and it can actually create some very complicated situations for them to deal with.
Sounds good to me.
All right. So we talked about this a little before. Searchman and the White Web, more zoning options. So it really comes down to if Shadow Man next time will be able to deal with Searchman, his boomer, the White Web, destroying the area. What do you think about that, Saul?
I think it's a rough matchup for Searchman, and you can't forget the lock-on charge shot that he has, and the satellite.
You are correct.
Oh,
Shadow
yeah,
Man
that's
is
gonna
one
be
of the
tough.
fastest navis to ever exist. He has a very low HP pool, but he is extremely versatile, not only fire attacks, but sword attacks as well.
Yeah, that's a tough call. We'll have to get there when we get there, I guess.
Sorry about that. Alright, so next up we got Cutman versus Rideman. Cutman is a very interesting Navi because he's one of the few Navis actually in Battle Network that did not just have a total design change when they were translated for the original Mega Man series. His kit is very much the same, with him summoning rotating scissors objects in the opponent's area, as well as using a very powerful clamp attack and a boomerang scissors.
Now, what's interesting here is that similar to the Momogra trip pop-up level 3, Vitamin has pop-up level 1 here. So,
Pop Up is its own chip. Unfortunately, there is no levels. It's actually superior to the Invis 3 chip.
oh, excuse me. No, I was trying to make a correlation between pop-up and Mole 3.
Oh, right. So it would be a level 1 mole, so to speak.
Exactly.
Alright.
So, I feel like it's gonna carry Ride-Man a little bit, but Ride-Man's attacks require him to be up above ground, so it's not even gonna be that much value for him here.
We do have to keep in mind that the pop up actually does keep him invisible, so he will actually have a very, very good window for dealing with these attacks. He can attack with linear shots, a chain, and he can toss hay bales that make it difficult for Cutman to move. Unlike most navis that teleport around in their own area or they move at a very quick speed, Cutman actually walks around very slowly. Hmm.
Plus, isn't there always an object in the center of Ride-Man's row too? And there's that scissor that just kind of follows around the edges there, right?
That's right, Cutman summons two scissors that constantly circle the area. Unfortunately, Cutman will not have the aid of his rocks to help him this time, but are we ready to get into the location, Soul?
Let's do it.
And the power plant again. If the Navis had any way to destroy the area, that is now no longer an accessible option. So
Thankfully, I don't think either of them did have that.
thankfully they didn't, right? Now, if this was Nightman's match, I would actually very decisively say that. Actually, I don't know. It's going to be a very interesting match, isn't it? The first thing we have to look at is the fact that Cutman actually does technically have defensive options. In the fact that he can summon those orbiting scissors so that Rideman can't actually shoot through them. In order to get maximum area, he also has to walk up all the way, which can make him eligible to be hit by Cutman's head scissors attack.
Well, okay. There's always a moment's like hesitation between each head scissor attack, right? It opens up and clamps shut. Maybe that's gonna be an opportunity for Rideman to use that pop-up chip to play defensively and then push his own narrative onto Cutman there. Plus, there's also the fact that Cutman doesn't have shoes or armor at all, so that means a lot of the attacks will be flinching.
It is true that he could bait out the Cutman cut and instead shoot him to hit stun before he actually follows up with his own Iron Whip, dealing a good amount of damage. Neither of these Navis have a very big HP base, and they're not very bulky either. Well, that's the same thing, but I'm just rambling at this point.
Yeah. Honestly, considering the stage, I do think it would come out to Rideman in the end here.
I do agree. Cutman actually did have some interesting kit when he destroyed some viruses. In the original integration of this tournament, he was actually going to get into Airstorm 3, the original version. But unfortunately, I left out some things, so he did not get Airstorm 3. He cannot air suck into the head cut, which was a very funny combo. So Rideman will be taking that Cutman chip, which is, funnily enough, just the head scissors attack. It will deal heavy damage to the opponent directly in front of him.
Okay, who's on? Oh,
The match we've been waiting for.
is it something we're waiting for? I don't think Nightman wins. This is not only the type disadvantage, but the battle chip that you got is supposed to be a guard that also just gets defeated by Groundman's normal attack patterns. And then there's those instances where Nightman just stands still and does nothing, while Groundman is just going to be pushing his advantage with those ground-breaking attacks. Like,
Well,
I
we
don't
have
see it.
to remember, Groundman actually doesn't have float shoes, but he doesn't actually have a method of destroying Nightman's entire area. Nightman cracks Groundman's entire area with one step. So he can actually very easily clog up Groundman's movements and make it very difficult for him to follow up. Groundman can still attack down all three columns, but if he does choose to stay in the middle, so if he can entertain that thought multiple times, then he will be taking the Wrecking Ball, which is also a breaking element chip, and it will also deal a large amount of damage.
So what do you think? Oh, let's check out the field, huh?
Yep. Well, that's interesting.
Very interesting.
So the destroyed power plant is a version of the power plant, so it will feature the metal panels, but it will also introduce broken panels. So the stage is already broken and disables movement. This is actually very difficult because Nightman is already a very strategic fighter. He plays at his own pace, so he would normally just wait to use the goofball poison phase chip to intercept the satellite 3 when he's moving around, so Groundman can't capitalize on that. But Nightman doesn't have anywhere to go. The panels are already broken, and there's so few to go, so Grandman can just barrage him with these drills and get through this stone body.
There's also the fact that since these panels are pretty much already broken all around them, Nightman can't perform the signature jump ability to try and rain these, not only to gain a forward momentum, but to rain down these barrage of stones onto the opponent's field. He has nowhere to move.
That is absolutely correct. Without the ability to move, most of Nightman's kit is actually gone. He can't do anything. And with these metal panels, that means actually that the panels can't be broken, so he can't inhibit Groundman's movement in the slightest.
Couple that with the ability of just standing there, thinking that your guard ability is more than enough to protect you from taking damage and doing nothing in return. Yeah, that's an easy clap for Groundman.
Nightman's biggest part of his kit is his ability for defense and his IHP pull, but Groundman also has an IHP pull, super armor, and has breaking capabilities, so Groundman will actually take this and move on to the next round. It's a very interesting match, but that's why we like to see it. Oh my gosh, it's another virus matchup. The Elegaya EX versus the Hardhead. Oh boy. Keep in mind that the Hardhead actually did get the Aqua Needle chip.
I don't think it helps it here.
You don't think
You
so?
want to? Okay, explain to us what the Elegaya is.
The Elegaya is a very Oni-esque chip and virus, and basically what happens is it will move around very quickly, and after 4 movements exactly it will always hit a column with an electrical attack. So the fastest version of the Elegaya X moves probably within like 5 frames to 12 14 frames, and it will then release a very fast lightning attack. So the hard hit will actually take a lot of damage. There's not really a lot of things it can do here, even with the Aqua Needle chip. So it'll basically never hit.
It will never hit. Meanwhile, the Elegaya will be able, like, it spams the Thunderbolts, but by the time his mouth opens up, he'll actually end up getting clipped by at least 1 or 2. And over time, not being able to deal damage, yeah, that's just the easy clap.
It's a very easy win. So the Elegaya will actually be taking the Cannonball chip. Sort of sad we didn't see a Navi with the Cannonball chip, but I suppose that's just how it goes. And next up, this is sort of another awaited match. Roll versus Shademan. Sort of a revenge grudge match for Roll, considering she got abducted by Shademan before. But it's very interesting because both of these Navis have very regenerative capabilities, very defensive capabilities. What do you think, Soul?
Okay, this is tough. Remember Roll's ability to instantly dodge out of danger once the opponent launches an attack? I don't think Shademan will be able to line up an attack here and get that bite down to recover his own HP. And couple that with the ability to regain HP over time, I think Roll might have an advantage here on raw abilities alone.
It is true, and even if she has new abilities to be able to hit the Shade Man's defensive option of splitting into 4 bats, something we didn't even get into last time is the fact she can summon viruses like the Mitar, like the Fire Geyser virus, that can actually deal AoE damage. Not AoE damage, but they can attack in columns and rows for very large attacks. She picked up the Thunderman chip, which can also hit bats. And not only this, but every time she will attack, she will also regain her HP, which means Shademan is at a losing battle. He is constantly going to be damaged. And we already affirmed that he's never going to be able to land this HP drain because he's never going to land the Sonic Pulse. There's few ways to actually make him confirm these chips except for the Quick Man attack.
Yeah. Well, maybe the field will change something up. Let's check it out.
The arena. The arena is a very interesting area. So basically, how the arena works is there's nothing. It's all null panels. This is a totally normal field, and nothing is different.
Uh, Unfortunately for Shade Man, that does him no favors.
Absolutely. This isn't including the fact that even if Roll summons the Matar and it includes hitting it with that, she can actually aim the roll arrow to hit one of the flaying bats and get rid of the quick man chip.
Yeah.
There's just no way for Shademan to deal with all these defensive options. The first barrier, the healing, the dodging.
Makes you wonder how she got abducted in the first place.
That was roll V1, and Shademan couldn't be hit until he was hit with a dark chip in that game.
True.
Alright, so Roll gets her revenge. She moves up the bracket, and we'll be taking that wonderful Shade Man chip. The Shade Man chip does have the pulse attack that paralyzes, which is huge, actually, for her kid.
It paralyzes or confuses, actually, because if you put in the input code, you can paralyze or pierce and pierce Invis, or you can pierce Invis and do confusion.
This is
So it's like it's a little, uniqueness there.
It's very interesting. So for enemies with status guard, you can actually get an out for that. Alright, so we're going back up to the bracket, and we see Gateman versus Clockman. Gateman previously secured the Judgment chip, but Clockman has been biding his time here. He's gotten the Bubble Star and the Momoga chip, so both of these two actually have gotten very strong options, but Clockman already has the ability to stall for time for his great finishing attacks.
Here's the problem. Bubble Star encases your opponent in a bubble, which depletes time. The Momogra pop-up bout chip, the Mole 3 rather, it also stalls for time. So these are turns that help buy into this 12 turn power that Clockman has. This is that's a pretty tough look.
That's right, as time goes on, these things are going to happen. At 3 o'clock, so about 3 actions in, Clockman shoots a laser independently of himself, so it won't even pop the Momoga chip if he's relying on it. At 6, so about 6 actions in, we're going to see the Crimson Dragon attack from the Lance. For those who are familiar, the Crimson Dragon was an extremely powerful enemy in Star Force 3, and it was actually a huge danger. It was one of the only things in the Star Force series that actually required a force transformation of sorts, of all things. 9, so 9 actions in. Rogue will actually be summoned in a Proto-Man-esque fashion, like the Navi chip, and attack multiple times against the opponent. Actually being able to secure a Navi chip without actually having obtained one is actually a huge step for Clockman here. And 12, finally, Gateman will be obliterated with a giant laser from the background, which is ultimately what you don't want to see.
Gateman's attacks are so predictable. He will eventually get hit and knocked out of his attack without the aid of super armor to help defend against those attacks. Yeah, Clockman has an easy time here just connecting and getting those wins.
Even with the gate, a lot of these attacks are pierced or summoned on top of him. And even defending himself behind the gate, the Crimson Dragon attacks in the back row, so there's nothing that can actually protect him here. Let's go to the location and see exactly how this is going to go down. Lovely!
Yikes.
Alright, so for those who don't understand, the eruptive volcano is a variation of the volcano field. So, unlike the volcano field, which is mostly lava, the eruptive volcano field is null panels, but both navies will constantly have their HP drained at a rapid rate. So this is literally a battle against time, and the squishier the navi, the worse. Clockman actually does take damage here, which means that he We'll actually have to close out the match before 12 actions, which means he probably won't be able to finish Gateman before he's able to use his finishing move. So what do you think with that in mind, Soul? Do you think that landing this attack with the laser, landing this Crimson Dragon, do you think Gateman can make up for that damage and try to close this out? Or do you think Glockman does enough damage that the damage from the field doesn't rack up?
Honestly, the fact that there are instances that Gateman will stand still and possibly gets nicked by a volcano panel, I definitely think Gateman has the edge here, DPS and location included.
You think Gateman has this?
Not Gateman, not Gateman,
Clockman.
excuse me, Clockman.
Keep in
Yeah, I
mind
think
that both these aren't volcano petals. This is a constant HP drain effect.
Oh,
Yes. Both navies are constantly in the way of taking damage here. I just used volcano panels as a reference because that makes it easier to think about.
yeah, I'm not. Wow. Okay. Yeah. No, I still say Clockman.
It is true that Clockman actually does have attacks outside of these timed attacks. He can throw blades on either end of the arena, and this can not only get rid of the soldiers that Gateman summons, but it can also nick him. So there's no way for Gateman to totally avoid damage with time. So that Crimson Dragon will signal the end, and Clockman will move forward with this Gateman chip. Would you like to talk about the Gateman chip on its own, Soul?
I've never actually known how exactly it works. I do know it summons like a few soldiers to attack into the line, but I don't know if there's a way to change it or change how the projectile works.
I know that it has something to do with objects, but we're not messing with objects too frequently here, so we're probably not going to see that aspect of its contribution. Next up is a very interesting match. We have Shadowman versus the Searchman. Shadowman is already one of the most feared navies in the underworld, and frankly enough, Searchman has his hands tied for him, even though he has two virus chips that are very powerful here.
Shadowman likes to summon illusions onto the battlefield, but with powerful AoE attacks like that boomer, like that white web, the clones will disappear almost immediately just from those chips alone, which will give Searchman the opportunity to lock down Shadowman's location and fire off some big charge shots or satellite cannons.
This is true. Shadowman doesn't have super armor, and he doesn't have a very bulky HP pool compared to Searchman. So if he does actually get nicked by these abilities, he can also actually send the clones into the white web, which actually makes it very difficult for Searchman to get repeated damage off of that, even though he's moving around so much.
Yeah, it's kind of tough call too on that front because the clones can definitely eat up some damage here.
The clones can also not only use sword attacks, teleport into the enemy's area, and they can also send fire waves at their opponent, which can do increased fire damage if we end up with a grass field.
But there's also the attacks where Searchman hides underground to throw his bombs. So those attacks might even be considered a hit.
That's true. His grenades will always hit an AoE, so even if they don't necessarily hit Shadowman, they will definitely hit his clones always, and they will knock those out.
And it takes a little bit of time for those shadow clones to come back too, so I don't know, this one's a pretty close one.
It's very interesting, especially with Searchman having these tools. But let's look at the location and see if maybe this match has to be forced to a close or if it gets extended. The ocean. This is actually really bad for Searchman because while Shadowman is floating above the ground, Searchman isn't. He's going to have his movement inhibited by these ocean panels.
I think it's interesting that you would think that ideally or initially, right? But Searchman isn't really moving around too much anyway, right?
Hmm.
He has the two he has the two boulders that he summons onto the field, which he usually will hide behind to make his attacks anyway, especially when he's using his search scope. Searchman's
Hmm.
biggest bone isn't his movement per se. It's always been the DPS he can shift out from safe positions.
Hmm. I think that is true. Searchman will hide behind any objects that he finds, and actually being the block to the battlefield will actually make it very difficult for Shadow Man to actually secure the damage. We do have to remember that he has the ability to throw anti-damage, and the Muramasa is a longsword range, so even if Searchman takes a lot of damage and hides behind these rocks, the Muramasa is uncapped. It will deal 1,000 damage if Searchman gets hit by it.
And yikes. Who do you think wins here?
I personally believe Shadow Man wins because these clones will attack with wide swords, they will attack with long swords, they will use the anti damage. These fire waves go through these objects. Even if Searchman lands a couple good hits, he doesn't have the offensive kit to really capitalize and lock down Shadow Man. He can disable the clones for an extended period of time, which is nice, but he doesn't have enough damage.
Then winner is Shadow Man.
You've played a lot of BN5 recently. How would you like to talk about Searchman's chip?
Now, Searchman's ship is a very, very deadly and overpowered battleship. Now, it takes some aiming, but once you lock down the cursor by holding the A and B button as you lock down that cursor, it will delete the entire hand of the opponent who gets shot up. And it also hits five times for 75 damage each hit. That's a massive amount of damage. Now, if you're in full synchro or rage, that is twice that amount. So oh, that's
Oh,
egregious amount of damage per hit.
oh wow! It shoots chips
And
out
it
of your
pierces
hand.
enemies. Yeah, it destroys tips.
Oh wow! So that's actually going to be huge for Shadow Man moving forward. That means that he will actually be able to deal with a lot of these defensive options that Clockman has accumulated over this time period.
Yup.
It's very interesting. But next up, we have a interesting match. I don't think anyone would have guessed they would have seen here: Ride versus Groundman.
Now, here's the thing. Groundman's super armor will play dividends against Rideman because most of his attacks are focused on like getting getting some solid damage down in order to line up the next attack after the opponent's flinching or is like mid movement. But Groundman, because of that super armor, he's gonna be able to stomach anything that's thrown at him
Hmm.
and punish with those drills, which keep the opponent locked down even longer. Right? I don't know. This
Groundman
looks
can
kind of
also
bad for Rideman.
Groundman can also destroy his area, and if Rideman goes up to hit with that chain whip, then he will actually get punished with the Nightman Navi chip. Not to mention the Satellite 3. Rideman only has the pop-up, so as soon as he sees that Satellite 3, he's going to be rushing the pop-up and using it for that duration. Keep in mind that he does have a gun, which will do cursor damage. Unfortunately, it just seems as though Groundman has better damage operation. He has a bulkier HP base. But let's look at the location. There might be something that benefits here. A non-breaking area or even holy panels that might be able to help here. The Oasis. This was the arena that decided it last time. But basically how the Oasis works is it will have holy panels, sea panels, and grass panels.
That's an interesting blend of panels there. Ah, yikes. So those ocean panels will like kind of hinder movement when crossing over them.
Oh, it'll also have sand panels.
Oh my gosh, sand panel too. Oh my
It's an oasis,
gosh,
my friend.
yikes, yikes. Um, this is pretty bad. The sand panels are even worse here. That means Rideman won't be able to actually launch his attacks as he'll be stuck in that sand. This is really bad. No, no, oh,
That is
that's not good at
absolutely
all.
correct. Groundman will also be destroying his area with time. He will drill underneath Rideman and destroy the panel he's standing on, which means he cannot land on that holy panel for long. He can't stall out at all. Groundman is actually able to manipulate his IHB base as well, and Rideman has no chips to actually manipulate the grass panels or the sea panels.
I have a question. Do these navies have access to their powerful battle chips, the special signature chips that they get from Downwork 5 and 6?
They use their attacks as they do in their own boss battles. Unfortunately, Groundman already uses the attack that he uses as his Navi chip for BN6, so it doesn't matter that much.
Yeah. This is definitely a W for Groundman here.
For Groundman, really?
I don't think he can. Yeah, I don't think Rideman can do anything to stop Groundman.
Oh, okay. You said it was over for Groundman. I was like, wait, Groundman? I thought we were on the same page here.
No, I said it was a W for Groundman.
Oh, a W for I thought withdrawal for a second, and I was like,
Oh,
that's how you know I don't do this. I agree. Ryan Man did have a long run. He beat Cutman, so he beat someone, right?
Oh yeah, because beating Cutman definitely is.
Hey man, he wiped out Yumland. Oh no, wait, no, that was
Oh,
Shadow Man.
wow.
He
Yeah, that was
mopped
Shadow
he mopped up Yumland.
Actually, if you really want to talk about the anime, he killed Quickman. So
What?
yeah, Cutman kills the Cutman brothers, and Cutman just straight up murk out Quickman as he appears, just straight deleted, no contest.
That's
Yeah,
funny. Very.
it's horrible.
It sounds horrible. I can't imagine what a family of people with scissors on their head would do to someone by killing them.
Yikes.
Yeah. But very interestingly enough, Roll encounters another virus chip. It's actually her first virus chip. It's the Elegaya. And we already know she has a bunch of defensive tools as well as the first barrier. She's been accumulating them. But now she's going to get access to Elegreal 3. This chip is insane. Would you like to talk about it, Sol?
Okay, so Electrial 3 just launches straight ahead at the opponent and does electrical damage, but it can also bounce back, right? So it hits going forward, and if there's an object or something behind them, it bounces back in your direction. So it can potentially hit twice, but the biggest thing here is it's an electric attack that hits the whole column, or whole row rather.
That's right. It's a very fast projectile. It is almost as fast, if faster than the roll arrow, and it can actually be used as a decent projectile option for a good amount of damage. So very interestingly, we are at our semifinals here for Bracket B, and we have Clockman and Shadowman and Groundman and Roll. I would just like to get your thoughts on this so far, Sol, because this has been a very interesting bracket. It hasn't been the most exciting bracket, but it has been a very interesting bracket.
First of all, I already knew Roll was gonna get top four. Roll is too powerful. Second of all, I'm really surprised Shadow Man made it this far at all, because Shadow Soul is one of the weaker souls in Balnuric 5, and yet the Navi's still putting in work.
We do have to remember that Shadow Man is feared for a reason. Even if Mega Man doesn't really understand why, or Lance looking at it like, well, I don't get it, he's just a ninja, right? But there are several Navis in the Undernet that are absolutely terrified. WWW went through a lot to get this Navi on their board, and just most of Scilab was actually taken out by Shadow Man all on his own as well.
Yeah, that's very true. All right, let's get into it. The Clockman versus Shadowman here.
Alright, so we already know that Clockman has the defensive options like the Bubble Star 3, the Mole 3, the Gate Man for the optional offensive option. But Shadow Man does have the Search Man, which you mentioned does actually destroy his hand, so he can actually get rid of those defensive options and keep Clockman out in the open. What do you think he can do?
So the nature of Searchman is really tough because it also pierces Invis, and it also pulls people out of the ground when they use a pop up or a Momogra battle chip. So there is literally no way to hide from this damage here. The only way they miss is if you have a barrier or aura, or if you. No, that's literally it. Or the opponent has to miss. And being a marksman in his own right, Shadowman's not going to miss that attack. And Clockman doesn't have any barriers, so yeah, that's looking like a quick snipe of chips in the hand to me.
And Shadowman does have the Bug Bomb, so Clockman's not going to have a lot of easy time moving around. He's already not a very fast Navi chip. He's not very bulky. He's gotten this far purely because he's been able to manipulate his time powers over a long period of time. So let's look at the location and see if there's something that can extend the game for him, if there's something that can make this a bit easier so he can stall, or if he's going to actually somehow make the situation worse for himself. The
Pile driver.
The pile driver is, well, first of all, it is a Boktai reference for those who don't understand. The pile driver is very interesting. Like the erupting volcano, Navis will take constant damage while the pile driver is up, powered by the sunlight, actually. Late Soul Navis will take 0 damage. Now, as far as I know, Clockman and Shadowman are neither pure of heart, so they will be taking damage. The biggest thing about the pile driver is that Dark Navis will actually take increased damage and have a very rapid HP drain in the pile driver area. Unfortunately, Shadowman is not a Dark Navi, even though he has done a lot of terrible things. So Clockman is not out of these woods yet. If anything, there is another timer that Clockman has to deal with, and he can't manipulate a lot of these time options.
Yeah, I don't see it as a good matchup for Clockman here. I don't think he has the arsenal to deal with all these tools that Shadowman has, especially with that Searchman chip in the back pocket there.
It is true that
That and
Clockman.
this is a win for Shadowman.
It is true that Clockman's natural abilities are very poor. He only has his clock boomerangs that can cut his opponent, but that's easily intercepted by any of the shadow clones that go after him.
Yeah, I just don't see it.
Unfortunately, there's no way for Clockman to deal with the utility that Shadowman has gotten, so that will immediately go to Shadowman.
Now here's an interesting match: Groundman versus Roll. Now Roll has the ability to destroy chips, just like Shadowman does. And we see how that got him pretty far. Just once that Searchman chip was locked in the socket, there's nothing that can really stop Shadowman. But Roll does this naturally, right? She does this with a charge shot. So,
It's also it's also true that Roll actually hasn't been relying on her chips as much, so if she beats Groundman here, she's actually probably not going to be phased as much by that toolkit as much as the other Navis were.
yeah, and couple that with the speed and the ability to just instantly warp out of harm's way, like a sort of spider sense. I don't know. Roll is looking kind of stacked.
Alright, well, before she gets to Shadow Man, she has to go through Ground Man. And Ground Man has gotten the Riot Man chip, which gives him actually access to the gun that he's been wielding this entire time. So that will actually be a quick shot for him in case he needs to do extra damage. He has access to the Nightman chip, which can punish with a large amount of damage, and also has access to the Satellite 3 chip, which is another huge damage battle chip.
Meanwhile, Roll has access to the Electrial 3. Electrial 3 being a decent chip attack that can pretty much do a decent amount of element damage, electric element damage, especially if there's an ocean panel or some kind of water available or nearby. Especially since she's unfazed by that with the Float Shoes ability. There's also the Shade Man chip, which causes paralysis or confusion depending on what she needs for that situation. So Groundman has to watch out for something like that as well.
It is.
And then, of course, the Thunderman battle chip as well, which will attack with a Thunderbolt 3 points away. So it's looking like she's a big threat if the ocean panels do show up.
Yeah, the ocean panels have been pretty frequent. Even if they haven't been that much of an elemental hindrance, they have definitely impaired movement before. And what Groundman doesn't want to have to deal with right now, when he can barely attack land attacks against Roll, is to have his movement further inhibited. One of the things that's actually very disadvantageous about this matchup is Roll does have air shoes and the float shoes, so she can just fly over these holes that Groundman generates.
Well, I guess the next up here is time to find out what field these two are fighting on.
Alright, let's go for it. Oh no. The swamp.
Yikes.
So
Which means there are, in fact, water panels present and even poison panels. To add insult to injury, Groundman cannot avoid either of these things. Oh no.
keep in mind, this is the base swamp. This is not the bog swamp. So these poison panels will actually be grass panels, not poison panels.
Oh. Oh.
Yep, it's a
So
normal
there's
swamp.
no ocean panels.
There is sea panels.
jeez.
There are still sea panels.
Oh
Unfortunately,
well, no, it's seeing. Oh, that's even worse.
it's sea and grass. Yes.
Uh,
Unfortunately, neither of them have
Yeah.
any fire for this utility, but Groundman still can't really avoid these options. I do think he will get off the Satellite 3 because it is a very fast chip and hard to avoid, but I don't think any of his slower attacks really meet the speed prerequisite that it does in order to hit roll in the first place.
especially when she has float shoes, so it makes the field almost irrelevant for her. There is the opportunity to destroy panels, but I'm not sure if he can lock down roll with that slow attack in the first place.
It is true that even if he was able to get that attack off, Roll would be able to just fly over the panels. But Roll can also summon the Fire Virus if her HP gets low enough that she feels it necessary to deal more damage on these grass panels.
This is tough, but I do think the edge here is for roll.
I agree.
Jeez, this really is happening. Roll is just on a streak.
You could say Roll is on a roll.
Going home.
You could say she's rocking it right now.
I'm going home.
You could say
Home.
she is a
Oh
true
my
rock
goodness.
man.
Why? Just why? Oh my goodness.
Do you need some blues for that wine?
Oh, that would make me feel better.
Honestly, I could go for some wine right now. Let's see. This last match. Now, both of these Navis had been fairly oppressive. One of the only Navis to really put a pin in Shadow Man's entire movement here has been Searchman, and Searchman just didn't have enough rush options to really deal with Shadowman's clones and or his high damage Muramasa.
There is one thing that Shadowman has that's going for him as well is the fact that the clones are there to block these attacks. Ro will have a hard time hitting, but she does have viruses to back her up as well. So the viruses will be taking out clones sporadically every once in a while. And if left unchecked, they'll be racking on damage on top of Shadowman over time, especially if it's the Mentor who's seeking him down and trying to launch those attacks whenever he can. Or that flame line doing fire damage all over the place too. It's wow.
It is.
That's actually a pretty good defensive shield or option for all.
The viruses and the clones do somewhat cancel each other out, whether they be taking up the clone's time or actually taking out some of the clones. The roll arrow is also a pretty fast projectile, so even if it doesn't hit Shadowman and take out one of these chips, it will actually take out one of the clones themselves. But what do you think? Will Shadowman be able to land the Searchman on the roll, or do you think he will catch her in one of those invisibility frames?
I think that's a toss-up because the way the Searchman chip works is it's a time dimming, but you could accidentally use a time dimming chip while she's using that invincibility dodge. That can happen.
I think he would use it at the beginning.
Whether it happens or not, yeah, sure, he probably would. But does losing her chips really impact role here? Let's take a look at what
I don't think
the
she
fields
does.
are, so we can. No, I don't think she does either. To be honest with you, I need to see what the field is.
I also need to see what the field is. It's been exciting.
I don't know, because it's like
The desert.
no.
Sand panels galore.
Okay,
Yep, they both have
No, wait.
float shoes, so
This
they
is
will
not
just
good.
not be affected by these. Oh, but that's true. The viruses will actually be
The
affected.
viruses will be affected, so they might not be able to move to deal with those shadow clones as easily as they would have beforehand. At least not initially, until all those sand panels are gone, and they do disappear after a set amount of time.
Oh, well,
But in that time, Roll is kind of a sitting deck.
It is true that the flame virus she summons actually is not impaired by the ground, so she can actually summon an option, but the Matar is just so superior because the Matar not only guards itself, which can actually block some of these clone attacks, but they can actually use a ground wave. Oh, no, they can't because these are sand panels. So she will not be able to rely on the Matar's defensive capabilities for this battle.
What do you mean?
These are ground waves.
It'll still hit over the sand panels.
Yo, but they don't work into sand panels. Am I wrong? I'm pretty sure if you hit the Dino Wave chip down onto a sand panel, it won't send a ground wave.
But that wouldn't stop the virus's attacks. The Dino... No, I don't think that stops the Dino Wave.
If you believe so, I could have sworn I remembered it being different. I might be thinking of the seismic virus with the rock arm.
Yes. The one that jumps up and comes down, it will thud into ground and it won't do anything because it doesn't make an impact because of the soft sand. But the Metors don't do that.
Alright, so that's cleared up. So the Matars will actually still have their movement capability reduced. It is important to mention that the Matar 3 actually has a very large HP base, so I doubt Shadowman will actually be able to kill it with one clone attack, even though he has a very high power base. So those ground waves will be getting off, and they will be hitting either Shadowman or the clones themselves. More importantly, though, we are assuming that Shadowman does land the Searchman, and they will knock out every single chip that Roll has acquired. The Elecroll 3, the Shademan, the Thunderman, the Groundman. If you're here for combos, no, I'm sorry. These are only Gregor Cross charge shots here. I'm sorry. we do have to keep in mind that Roll does heal naturally with every attack. So even if Roll misses one of her roll rushes, she will actually still heal off of that. But what do you think? Do you think she lands the roll arrow and maybe takes out this bug bomb or this clockman chip? Do you think
I
Shadow?
definitely think she will. One of those hits is definitely going to stray, and those viruses, especially the fire one, is not going to be locked down forever. And then she'll be back on even footing, especially since she has that instantaneous dodge and the healing factor, which Shadowman does not have.
Shadowman does not have the healing factor, but that does play into his Muramasa. Unfortunately, Shadowman is not fast enough to really capitalize on the fact that Roll can actually dodge the Muramasa. Probably one of the only Navis, besides Quickman, in this tournament that would actually be able to dodge the Muramasa in the first place.
I think this one goes to Roll.
I think so too. I don't think the Bug Bomb would hit either. So even if the roll arrow knocks that Clockman out of the hand, there's nothing the Bog Bomb can really do besides maybe confuse a Batar and make it stop attacking. Roll's healing factor is immeasurable, and even if Shadowman is landing these hits with perhaps the multi-hit anti-damage, then even then, Roll still is getting some HP feedback. She's still constantly attacking. She's constantly charming viruses. She is a unstoppable machine. She won the Battleship Challenge for a reason, and she's going to beat Shademan right here. She's going to beat him down into the ground. What do you think, Sol?
Yeah, that's she's definitely gonna beat him into the ground. That's a dub for Roll. Let's give her the chip.
Alright. So she wins that, and unfortunately I can't just decide a winner here, but she wins in our hearts. And she will be going to Top Cut with the Groundmanship, the Shadowmanship, Alec Roll 3, Shademan, and Thunderman. This is an extremely electric folder for her. She has Stun. She has Panel Reduction. She has Shurikens. She can do the Naruto all day if she wanted to. But more importantly, she does have her kit, and she can actually take some of these tools against Element Man in the top bracket. Next week or next month, we will be looking at Bracket C, and there's some crazy things in here. We got Toad Man. We got so many viruses you wouldn't believe. We got Mist Man. We got Bowling Man. We got Fire Man. We got Django Man. We got Django.
Oh man, this is gonna be an interesting bracket to check out.
We will be seeing our second final boss since Cash Falzar itself. And that will be interesting all on its own. But what would you like to say before we finish this up, Sol?
And thanks for having me. This was an interesting round, and Roll is definitely one of my favorite Navies. Period. So I'm so happy that she's the one that came out on top here.
I'm very happy myself. She's definitely benefited from having buffs from various versions, but we'll see how she takes that into Top Cut, if she'll be able to defeat some of these crazy Navies with straight powers from different dimensions. And that'll be all. Thank you very much for being here, Sol.
Thank you for having me.